Kevin Jacob's Quest, and today we got some new information about the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie that potentially was going to happen, possibly a trilogy, and of course this is all coming off the back of the ending of Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 1, question mark. The possibility of a Season 2 has been coming up a lot lately. Kathleen Kennedy even said something to the effect of like, oh, if there's like a good response to it, of course the window's always open for Season 2. And of course, Ewan McGregor himself has always said that he's willing to come back. So, yeah, on the back of all that, we're getting information about this movie trilogy that didn't end up happening. But we got this interview from the direct, from the writer who was working on that, the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie that potentially would have been a trilogy. So let's go ahead and look into that. Okay, so Beatty, his name is Beatty. What's his actual first name? Stuart Beatty. Okay, anyways, Beatty revealed that he only wrote the screenplay for the original feature film that the show was based on and never collaborated with the series writers, while also mentioning Solo's box office performance as the reason for the Kenobi movie never getting made. And I'm not going to go through like every single quote that he says here. I'm just going to kind of gloss over this, so obviously come and read this if you want to read everything that he says. But yeah, he says, right, so not at all, none. I wrote the film that they based the show on. So yeah, I spent like a year and a half working on it, and then when the decision was made not to make any more spin-off films after Solo came out, I left the project and went on to do other things. Joby came on and took my scripts and turned it from 2 hours into 6. So I did not work on them at all. I just got credit for the episodes because it was all my stuff. He also mentions how he was involved convincing them of 3 stories for Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is, with this idea of possibly a trilogy maybe could have happened. And the fact that, and the first of which ended up becoming the season's first season and featured the death of Reva, which we'll talk about the whole death of Reva stuff in a second. So here's what he says. So when I pitched my Obi-Wan story to Lucasfilm, there are actually 3 stories there because 3 different evolutions of that character has to make in order to go from Obi-Wan to Ben. The first one was the movie, which was the show, which was surrender to the will of the Force, transport your will, blah, 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 blah. The second movie was thinking about where Kenobi ends up, and one of the most powerful and probably the most powerful moment in all of Obi-Wan's story is the moment where he sacrifices himself in A New Hope. And then he just goes on to say how like, oh, I'm going to let go. It required forethought. That's required pre-acceptance that this was going to happen. He goes on to it a little bit more here. So he says, it's one of those universal things we all struggle with, to come to terms with our own mortality. So that was the second step of the evolution for me, that Obi-Wan now has to come to terms with his own mortality, somehow in a prophecy, or Qui-Gon telling him there's going to come a moment where you're going to have to sacrifice yourself for the good. And then Obi-Wan's like, what? No, I'm here. I'm here to help. I can't. No. And go to him to the point where Obi-Wan has to accept the idea that he's going to die. So yeah, basically what he's saying in all of this is that the second film, the second step in this potential Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy would have just been all about Obi-Wan accepting that he's going to have to become a Force ghost, and he kind of knows what's going to happen, which I think does line up pretty well with A New Hope, because if you remember that scene, like Luke says something to the effect, like when they're first talking, he says something like, oh, I thought Obi-Wan Kenobi was dead, and Ben's like, no, well, not yet, and he like looks off to the distance like, not yet, he's not dead yet, so it does, obviously in A New Hope, it does seem like he already knows kind of what's about to happen, so that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And then he goes on to confirm that, like, yeah, there was gonna be 3, Ewan was on board, everyone was ready to go. It's a great story to tell, right? It's such a fitting character, and Ewan's just so fantastic at it, and he's the perfect age and everything. It was just dying to be done. Unfortunately, it's just that Solo, it was Solo that changed the direction of the system. I like Solo personally, but it hadn't made a lot of money. It is crazy in some ways to think about how it was directed by one of the best filmmakers working today, but just because it didn't hit a certain number, they just had to rethink. And again, way above my pay grade, but it certainly crushed us. Devastated, absolutely devastated. But that's the business, highs and lows. I'm glad it got made. I'm glad the show got made. I'm proud of my story that got told. I'm glad my characters are all through it, and I'm glad I got credit for it. I wish they'd been able to make my movies. And he was asked if he was able to submit a treatment for the second or third movie to Lucasfilm. He said no, just the first, because they hadn't hired me to do the others yet, because I was busy working on the first one. Okay, so basically what we're getting told here is that he only ever actually submitted anything for the first movie, but he did pitch to them the idea of a trilogy, you know. So that was like, everyone was like down to do a trilogy, everyone agreed to it, but he had only ever actually written anything down for the first movie. But he had, like, you know, his whole idea of Obi-Wan evolving into, you know, Alec Guinness, Ben Kenobi. So very interesting stuff there is that, like, of course, a lot of the elements, like he said, were left over from his movies that was going to be made. So the character of Reva and a lot of the stuff about Darth Vader, I'm sure, was originally came from this script. So it's pretty interesting to think about. They took a 2-hour story and they stretched it to 6 hours, which, you know, I've seen a lot of that complaint about, like, the pacing of it and how, like, some of the show seems to be stretched out a whole lot, story wise. And the thing I find most fascinating about that is that we're sort of living through this weird, really fast revisionist history. As Obi-Wan was airing, and I tweeted about this, as Obi-Wan was airing, repeatedly I heard over and over again people were saying, oh, episode 4 and episode 5, they're too short, they're only 30 minutes, they need to be like an hour long, you know, so on and so forth. And that was like this main complaint that a lot of people were having. And yet now I'm seeing a lot of those same people are now like, oh, I wish we had gotten the movie, everything was stretched out too much, you know. So it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of funny. Like, which one do you want? Do you want it to be 2 hours? Do you want it to be 6 hours? Because, you know, I am glad that we got the show we got, personally, because I feel like, yes, it did feel like, especially episode 4, I think, was definitely kind of spinning its wheels, kind of like, okay, it was a cool set piece, it was a cool, like, little mission, but it was like, he's once again saving Leia. We kind of did this 2 episodes ago, like, you know. So I agree with all that. But I do feel like we were able to live in this world longer, you know. And so I'm not, you know, I'll never, you know, even if the pacing gets wonky or whatever, I'll always rather take more than less, you know. So that's just me. But he does go on to some interesting things, you know, about, like, the sequels, and this kind of talks about, like, is there going to be a season 2 of Obi-Wan? Of course, he never, you know, he says he never submitted anything, right? Let's look at the actual quote, what he says. Beto was asked if he had actually been able to submit a treatment for the second or third movie to Lucasfilm, and he says no, just the first. So he never actually submitted a treatment for the second one. So if they do make a second season, which I would say is pretty possible, you know, it like, logically it seems like, yeah, they'll just pick up where he's talking to Qui-Gon and he learns more about, like, the spirit world of the Force and all that stuff, right? It does seem like it would kind of follow the same trajectory that he had laid out of where this could go, but he never submitted a treatment. So I'm kind of curious if, like, that would become an issue of, like, do they even credit this guy, because he never, you know, he didn't submit a treatment for a second movie. So, you know what I mean? Like, that seems more iffy area. But it is an interesting thing about how, like, you know, of course we knew, just like with Boba Fett was also originally going to be a movie, although I do not believe that the Book of Boba Fett took anything from any sort of, like, prior movie or anything like that. I think that was all Jon Favreau. So, you know, it's not entirely the same situation, but it is kind of funny how, like, because of Solo, because of what happened to the box office of that movie, you know, obviously, very publicly, the plans of Lucasfilm shifted, you know, like, and look, we can, like, go over Solo again and again and again. You know, people will say, like, oh, it was The Last Jedi, and everyone was so angry about it that they didn't go see Solo, when you know, like a lot of people, I think it was the marketing, it was the timing of the release, that played much more bigger factors into like why anyone, why a lot of people didn't go see it. Look, I'm pretty sure I saw Solo twice in theaters, so I did my part. I don't know what the rest of you were doing. I did my part. I saw that movie twice in theaters. Anyways, no, but it's interesting. This is not the first show that was originally supposed to be a movie, and obviously Disney Plus and Mandalorian taking off, like, that changed things. And obviously now we're in the situation where it's like it's all gonna be on Disney Plus. When's the next time they're even gonna make a Star Wars movie? I know Taika's working on his thing, which I think with the last update we got is that he's still just now writing it, so that's definitely not coming out in 2023. I think we all acknowledge that. So it is kind of an interesting thing of like, Solo happened. You can blame whatever you want to blame. Like if you want to believe that it was because people were so angry at The Last Jedi, even though I don't think that makes any sense, you can go ahead and believe that. It doesn't change the fact that it didn't do well, and it caused this giant shift in the scheduling and the tactics of what do we do now. And then Disney Plus happened, and that's the other thing I think a lot of people are already not trying to forget, but they are already kind of like forgetting the fact that, like, oh right, Disney Plus didn't come out until 2019, so like it wasn't even an option to do anything else other than try and make these movies, so I don't know how a trilogy of Obi-Wan Kenobi's movies would have really worked. It would have definitely been interesting. So we did get some more information here specifically about the fate of Reva and all this. So here's what he says. When asked if Reva was in the early drafts of the movie script, Beatty says, "She was my creation. I created Reva all the way through." He continued by discussing Reva's view of the Jedi as villains and how the character originally had no knowledge of Anakin being Darth Vader. Except the only little difference is mine. She didn't know Darth Vader was Anakin, because I was like, how'd she know that? All she saw was Anakin as Anakin, because he hadn't changed in the suit yet, right? So Anakin killed her friends, put the scar on her, almost killed her, left her for dead, basically. So in her mind, the Jedi Council were the biggest villains in the galaxy. She believed the lies that they were plotting a coup to overtake and get power and all that, but they were stopped by the clones. So she believed that's why she's hunting Jedi, because she believed the Jedi are the worst, basically. Now, I gotta say right now, I don't like that. I much prefer the version of Reva that we got. Okay, because first off, her putting together that Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, best friend of Chancellor Palpatine, who came to the temple and killed everyone, and then later, oh, who's Darth Vader? He's this guy hanging out with Palpatine all the time. It doesn't take a genius to put that together, so I don't, they don't even have to have a scene where she like puts the things together and it's like this big discovery. It's like, no, I totally buy it. Like, yeah, over the course of what, a decade since then, yeah, people would be able to easily put together like, oh yeah, it's obviously Anakin, right? Like, he's the one, because that's the thing, is that like the galaxy at large thinks Anakin died, but Reva, of course, knows, like, no, Anakin was the one who was killing people. He didn't die with the rest of the Jedi. He was the one who was there to kill people. So, of course, from there, she could just be like, oh, well, he's clearly Darth Vader then. Like, that doesn't take a genius to put that together. So, I don't agree that, like, his whole thing is like, well, how would she know that? It seems pretty obvious to me that, yeah, you could easily put that together. I don't know. And the other thing is that, like, his version of Reva would have bought into all of the propaganda that the Jedi are the bad guy and they tried to take over and it's a big coup. That's not nearly as interesting. I'm sorry, it's just not. The idea that what we have is that she joined the Inquisitors in order to get close to Darth Vader because she's been plotting her like revenge against him for the last decade. That is a million times more interesting than someone who actually buys it, someone who's actually a part of this. That's just the truth. And then we go into the fate of Reva. It ended with her dying at the hands of Vader in order to save Obi-Wan. He says, because I figured, how would she know that this thing in a mechanical suit that everyone calls Darth Vader is the guy who killed her or tried to kill her? So it was Obi-Wan kind of letting her in on that secret, and that revelation, that makes her kind of go, oh my god, I've been wrong this whole time. And so she goes and basically saved Kenobi by sacrificing herself, telling Vader, I killed Kenobi. And then Vader kills her, with her knowing that Vader would kill her. So that kind of completed her arc. So that a little bit of difference was that, yeah, absolutely, the Inquisitor hunting Kenobi all the way through and driven by her own personal demons. So, you know, again, this is another thing that, like, I'm glad they changed that, because, well, one, this whole self-sacrifice and then, like, you're redeemed and then you're dead, look, that is a, well, that's just a thing that Star Wars does over and over and over again, right? And I get that, but it is refreshing to finally have a, you know, a main character in one of these stories not just die. You know, like they come back to the light, or, you know, or at least relatively not as evil, right? And then they don't die. They just get to live on and try to, you know, make amends or whatever, right? So, like, that's actually a much better way of going about this, because now obviously you can tell that in another series or a novel or comic series or whatever, right? So that's just a better decision overall. And the idea that, like, so she, in his version, she would have fully bought into the lie that the Jedi were trying to take over the government, and then it was the revelation that Obi-Wan Kenobi just tells her, oh, Darth Vader is Anakin, and that's the revelation that makes her go, like, oh, I was wrong, I'm gonna go help Kenobi now. My question then would be, like, how would she even know that he's telling the truth? You know, like, that's one thing, but also, like, this idea that she thinks the clones were there to stop the Jedi, but then she also saw Anakin killing younglings and herself, like, how does that even add up? You know, like, she's, you know, her and her younglings are the Jedi. Anakin tried to kill the Jedi, and then she thinks the clones were the good guys, but they were with Anakin. How, you see what I'm saying? Like that original backstory doesn't quite add up nearly as much as the one that they have now, you know. So I will say this much, you know, like, as much as I see a lot of people out there saying, like, I wish we had gotten movies, I wish we, you know, gotten a trilogy and all this, I think this whole story for Reva makes a lot more sense now than it did then. So, at least as far as that goes, I'm really glad that they made this change. And let's see, he goes on to say, yeah, killed by Vader at the end of it. I wanted this story, I want her story to end. I wanted Reva to play her part in the Kenobi Vader story, which was essentially at the end. She was the one that allowed Vader, basically told Vader to stop hunting Kenobi, you know. She ended the obsession Vader had with Kenobi. She claimed it was over, it's done. So that was her role to play. And she'd done so many terrible things, I felt she had to die. You can only redeem so much. Yeah, see, that, again, that doesn't, she had to die, you can only redeem so much. I don't know, guys. Again, like I said, it's like, it makes a lot more sense if, you know, she's still a dark side user in the version we got, but it's only because she's trying to take down the other dark side user, you know. I don't know, I like that version a lot more. And also this whole idea that, like, she told Vader to stop because Kenobi's dead, and then he kills her, but then he still is supposed to believe her, and that's why he's not obsessed with it. That doesn't add up either, you know. Like, the idea that, like, you know, like what we got is how, like, Palpatine is the one who's like, hey, you gotta knock this off because it is making you weak, you know. And Vader's like, oh, I can't upset Palpatine. Like, that makes a lot more sense as to why he would stop it, you know, than just him believing what Reva says but then killing her anyways for some reason. Why would he kill her if he believed her? Do you see what I'm saying? So, like, I'm already, like, I like the version we got. The writer also confirmed that the original plans for Kenobi didn't include the other Inquisitors, just Reva. So no other plans to include any other Inquisitors. I knew I wanted Darth Vader. big overall villain of the story. See him as the antagonist who was going to be more one-on-one with Obi-Wan throughout the show. So Reva really was the result of that. I knew I needed that character. Continuing by describing how explore the fallout of Order 66 to inform Reva's character and take her to a place of understanding. There's so many great characters from the Purge, the temple and everything. I was just like, okay, let's see what she was doing at the Purge. What if she saw everything that went down? What if Anakin Vader killed her, left her for dead, sent her on this path? So all that kind of stuff just kind of made sense and allowed me to create a very confused, conflicted, blinded character filled with hate and rage. The stuff that makes people want to be a Sith and Sith acolytes, and takes her to a place of understanding truth, understanding who Obi-Wan is, who Vader really is, and what her path is in the galaxy. The Kenobi writer also touched on the struggle of bringing stakes to a prequel project involving Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, and how Reva allowed McGregor's character to have someone to defeat or someone to save. We were always faced with the fact that Obi-Wan could never kill Darth Vader, so he needed to defeat someone. So Reva was my attempt to give him someone to defeat or someone to save, because he's not going to save Darth. The Darth Vader storyline is going to end in a downer, so I wanted to save someone, and that's why I created Reva. Third sister of the Fallen Order. He says, so I hadn't played Fallen Order. I wrote this initially in 2017, so that was before I played Fallen Order. I then played Fallen Order and was like, oh wow, this is Reva. No, look, it's just coincidence. I wanted to create a new character because I didn't want to be bound by any canon with any of the others that have already been discussed, and I wanted freedom to take her where I wanted to take her. So that's why I created her for this story. And that's the other thing too. We're already using so many characters in established canon with Obi, Darth, Owen, Beru. So I was looking to create someone new. I even had Cody in mind, so I was looking to create someone new. Okay, so yeah, basically, there's obviously, he created Reva, the character, and there's a lot of things that did stay intact as far as her origins concerned, but like her motivations are entirely different, which I think they vastly improved upon, and the fact that she got to live at the end, I think, was the much better decision. And look, obviously the character of Reva has been a hot topic for debate, both the horrible things that were sent to the actress, but also like people's reception of just the character itself. Look, the internet has a way of trying to make like a solid decision on something, and then people will be like, this is how everyone feels, so you end up getting like this big like encampment of people with like this one opinion because I don't know, their favorite YouTuber has that opinion, and so they must agree or something. I don't know. Anyways, I thought Reva was actually a really fascinating character. I think her motivations in this original draft here were not nearly as interesting as what they ended up coming out with, which is fine, right? Like stuff gets rewritten all the time. Like any movie that you love, any show you love out there, like chances are it's been rewritten like 2, 3, 4, 5 times, so like this is not anything like crazy, it's just that he was not involved in the show. He was only involved back when it was going to be a movie. So I think that's what kind of makes this like a little bit of a unique thing, is that like the second they turn this into a TV show, he just wasn't part of the picture anymore. Obviously he still got credited, so I feel like he got his due, he got his credit for it. But it is just interesting hearing this perspective, because like this guy's never gonna have, his movies are never going to be made now, so I don't know, just very interesting stuff. And as far as like a season 2 of Kenobi, like what they could possibly do with that, I would absolutely be fine if they wanted to come out and be like, okay, the second season of Kenobi is going to be a much more intimate, like he's not going to be going on like this, he's not going to go fight an Imperial compound and then Darth Vader finds out he's alive again, and then all these other Inquisitors are chasing him. Like if they make a season 2, I want it to be much more of a spiritual journey. Like he can still leave Tatooine, but if only to like go to Dagobah and then go to the same Force planet that Yoda went to when he was doing his training with the Force priestesses and all that. If he goes and has to go on those same trials, like he has to go to the exact same planets and everything, I can see that happening and actually being pretty cool, you know. And if anything, that would actually be really neat as to why we didn't see him try to communicate with Yoda at all, or even like mention Yoda, which, you know, hey, maybe they just never communicated with each other like in the last like 19 years or something. But, you know, if he's doing his Force training, it does kind of make sense that like eventually he would have to show up on Dagobah, right? Like, 'cause that was the whole thing, is Dagobah's like another one of these, you know, Force nexuses of the Force, you know, like one of these like center points where it's like, oh, there's so much life here on this planet. And you know, you go watch season 6 of the Clone Wars, essentially do that, but then just go even further with it, you know, with Kenobi. And I feel like that would be a pretty strong season 2. You know, like you honestly, you wouldn't need to have Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker or Leia, or you wouldn't have to have any of those characters involved at all. Like they were all left at a really good place. It feels like, you know, Obi-Wan's accepted that he doesn't have to, like, you know, he can, you know, stay on Tatooine most of the time, but he doesn't have to like literally watch Luke every single day with like through binoculars, you know. Like he can go live, you know, he went to go live out in Beggar's Canyon somewhere, you know, he's way out there, right? So he can leave Tatooine and he doesn't need like this big motivating thing of like someone got kidnapped again, you know. Like he can just leave because it's part of the training. Got to go to Dagobah, got to go to this Force planet. You know, just lean full into it. Anyways, yeah, that's what I would want to do, you know, have a lot of moments between him and Qui-Gon and just talking about stuff. Like that would be crazy fascinating. You know, I would say the only problem here is that if you don't have him running into a bunch of Imperials or other people with lightsabers, then obviously there is a lot of like action stuff that you're gonna have to find some other way to have action, because like, you know, I can't imagine them doing a whole season 2 of Obi-Wan that's like 6 episodes long, and then, you know, all the Force stuff is going to be really interesting to me, but I have to imagine that your average audience member is going to be like, when is he going to swing a lightsaber? You know, that I think that is the one thing that would be missing from that premise. Yeah. Anyways, this is all really fascinating stuff. You can go read these articles if you want to like read the entire quotes of what he's talking about here, but yeah, I'm happy with what we got. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, what do they call it, like Monday morning quarterbacks or whatever, right? Like people who are like, oh, if it was a movie they could have done this and this and this and this. But like, if you look at this guy's quotes, if you actually like look at what his ideas were for the movies, I honestly think we're much better with what we got. You know, like we came out with the much more interesting characters, the more interesting version of events, I think. Yeah, you know, and look, there's always gonna be this weird, like, you know, in some parallel universe where Solo did good at the box office. You know, we had an Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy, and then we had a Boba Fett movie, you know, like everything would be drastically different if Solo had done better at the box office. And it's kind of crazy to think about, because like, has there ever even been a moment like that in Star Wars before, where it's like this one movie just drastically changed everything about the trajectory of these projects, you know? It's just, it's fascinating to think about. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Obi-Wan Kenobi as a trilogy of movies, and his ideas for Reva and her dying and not knowing Anakin was Darth Vader. Anything else that you guys have theories about, let me know how you feel about all this, and I'll see you guys next time.